Hello, welcome, Gini, to the Dublin Conversations. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to. I am Gini Dietrich. I am the founder, author, CEO, I don't know, head janitor of Spin Sucks, which is a book, a blog, and a podcast.
Okay, fine. And you also was responsible for the peso model in terms of
that is correct.
Profound influence.
We did invent the peso model as part of, and it came about as part of when I was writing Spin Sucks, the book. It was published in that and sort of has created its own identity for sure in the last 10 years.
Great stuff. Okay, so let's take our journey of our 5 steps to the Dublin window. Share the PowerPoint now. So we're in a context where we're working in an industry where there's been both greater fragmentation, convergence, established ideas like advertising, journalism, marketing, PR, and more. Do they need to be replaced with better ones? We've got opportunities for new knowledge. Can we co-create new ideas to do our jobs better and rise to the challenge of society's wider issues of growing distrust, divisive tribalism, or not being able to come together to tackle our big issues? So can we unlearn some of our existing ideas to enable us to be open to developing new ones? So this idea behind our 5 steps to the Dublin window. So step 1 is that the idea that you need to create confidence to be purposeful. And by the word confidence, we don't. Most people use it when it really means self-confident, whereas it's more in the statistical meaning of confidence in that it matches the probability of it being accepted as real by the wider world. And so what we're suggesting is that for many failings to define things like public relations, the root is the fact they've been starting at the wrong place. They've been like the early astronomers defining a universe with the Earth at its center. And so we're suggesting that confidence in your consciousness and what you perceive to be reality, who you are, your purpose and purposefulness, confidence in others to help not harm you, confidence others having you, and also like confidence of the time and mood. And what we're saying is that confidence is obviously a well-known word, but really a critical known unknown that we need to know more about it in order to grow our collective wisdom. And at the heart of our step 1 is that purpose and purposefulness makes it easier to create confidence by being more coherent and compelling. Just wondering any views on that at all, Gini?
You know, in the last almost 3 years since the pandemic shut everything down, and then we had, especially here in the States, we had the social justice crisis. We have climate change. You know, we have all these things that are happening to the world. And during that time, communicators became increasingly more valuable. And I think that this is why, is because not only as communicators, we're serving a purpose for our organizations and doing things that mean something, but also our executives, either our clients or the people that we work for, are finding more confidence in the work that we're doing as well, and finding that it's purposeful. So as we think about where the world is going, and certainly it still doesn't look very pretty. So I think we have another couple of years ahead of us that are going to be rough. But be thinking about that from this perspective of how to create confidence to be purposeful.
So again, a starting point that we can build upon in growing our effectiveness of our work. And step 2, this is inspired by the work of behavioral psychologists such as Professor Daniel Kahneman, where he identifies that we're emotionally driven animals, but sort of 5 key rules of thumb, or what are known as heuristics, really sort of frame how we can effectively interact with others. And if we need to interact, we need to be known and noticed, which accords really with the tradition of building awareness. Liked, and likability is not just effective liking, but also could be respect, admired, and even liking to dislike someone. Trust, front of mind, you may be well known, but unless you're front of mind when people are making decisions, you may lose out. And being talked about, social proof. And the Dublin Conversation believes this really sort of frames any brief, any campaign, provides a structure for, you know, the key goals you need to be achieving in interacting with others. Any thoughts on this sort of framework?
I think this is it's a really nice framework from the perspective of what we do. You know, you're talking about social proof, you're talking about brand awareness, you're talking about thought leadership, you're talking about building trust and reputation and credibility. And certainly, you know, being liked is part of that, but also to your point, being liked enough to be not liked, you know, understanding who you're doing business with and knowing that it's okay that if your values aren't aligned, that you're going to part ways. So I like this framework because it is much of what we already do.
Yeah. And then building upon this is then a framework very familiar to you, and its roots lie within the original PESO model of what we call the 5 opens choices. And the thing to stress there, these are not channels, but strategic options. So you need to identify, need to be known, like trusted, front of mind, being talked about. How do you do that? And you explore the different dimensions of own, so that with clarity around your own character and purposefulness, your behaviors. Even spending time with someone could be a route for earning trust. And you know, so the bottom of the list says owned media channel. So a whole host of different aspects to what is meant by own. And a new element there of the nudge, which again, a lot of people sort of get their head around in terms of, so what nudge is not a channel, it's not, but it represents a strategic choice of how you make choices easier for others. And also really sort of stressing, which I think is very much a message from the PESO model, about thinking in a bigger, wider way and different strands, and also integrating the strand to get the full synergies from that there. So I'll go back to the sort of the schematic now. Really welcome any comments or thoughts on this, Gini.
Well, you know, I love the PESO model for obvious reasons, but I love how you've taken this and put it into the frame of more a canvas for helping you find confidence and purpose. And certainly, you know, the things that you have around clarity for your character and your purposefulness, doing, I might be raining on your parade, but thinking about how are we leading with what's important to our audiences versus what's important to us. All of our content and our social and our earned media and even our paid social, our paid search is thinking about that purpose and that confidence and being more purposeful in creating that opportunity for our customers, our audiences, our stakeholders to understand what it's like to work with us and to be part of our communities.
So there's a need there to be immersed in other people's world in terms of engaging as much as your own in terms of what you're wanting from any situation.
That's
or
exactly
how you're
right.
perceiving it. Yeah. And then we'll move on then to the step 4, and this is really about the power of emergence, that our world is shaped by what emerges around us, and embraces a very simple model created by Professor Gareth Loudon of Imperial College London, where and it explains really how the creative act of, we think of new ideas by a process of listening, connecting, and doing. And doing can be developing the concept as well as a transaction, a physical action, and this constant dynamic moving strip of a loop, that constant listen, connect, do, and at its heart is purpose, where the more purposeful you are, the more it generates these connections in an environment of like empathy, collaboration, and reflection. And you know, stressing important there to listen to bottom up as much as top down. And also what's emerged is a label in our industry of comms, which is widely used but doesn't have any formal definition. And the Dublin conversation suggesting it could be a potential candidate where it's bigger than integrated communications, because it also includes managing behaviours, but also being purposeful and investing in building in social cohesion. So a possible candidate for a definition of comms could be how you create confidence within yourself and with others to exist, coexist, cooperate, collaborate by managing perceptions around your future behaviours, which is fundamental to being purposeful. Just want your thoughts on sort of, is there a need for sort of a new word for our industry, what we do, and any thoughts on what comms and potential sort of candidate definition now?
You know, it's funny. I think the industry overall needs to figure this out first, because what I have found, especially in the last probably 5 years, is that executives don't really care what you're called as long as they get the work done. Um, and I'm finding that more and more companies, certainly a little more sophisticated, already have all of this integrated. And in some cases, it's communication. Sometimes it's PR. Sometimes it's integrated comms. Sometimes it's integrated marketing. But and sometimes it depends on where it reports to. Sometimes they report to the CEO. Sometimes it's to its CMO. Sometimes it's to HR. Sometimes it's to counsel. So I think all of that depends too. But I think our biggest challenge as an industry, and perhaps what some of this is what you're solving, is that we haven't come together as a group to say, this is what we are, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. And I think those two significant instincts that you have at the bottom there, which are me-led and we-led, are really important in helping to define what it is that we do, or what we're called, I guess.
Yeah. So on those, as I say, the we-led is an instinct where your immediate response is to think of the collective group interest, and me-led individual. What have you got an idea about potentially that these could be sort of the seedbed for a distinct philosophy around, say, public relations could be described as a we-led discipline, and maybe advertising as a me-led discipline? Just any thoughts there at all?
I think I think some of us are already doing that for sure. When I think about some of the work that we do, it's very much we-led. It's really about thinking about what the stakeholders and the audiences need first. All of the things that we create, from content to social to, briefing docs that we do for media, whatever it happens to be, it's all about what the end user, the listener, the reader, the watcher need, and what their pain points are. Where I think you're right, advertising, and in some cases marketing and product marketing, tend to be more me-led.
Yeah. And you described there how the industry, there's been an emergence of responses where already doing these activities we described, but a lack of a formal labeling, formal map. So, for example, from your own work, your PESO model was extraordinarily profound, because on one level, many people are already doing it, but the very existence of a model, an overview, provided people both with an overview, a map, a structure, and also confidence to engage in that sort of journey and activity. And just wondering if any thoughts there about, yes, people may be doing these sort of things, but would there be benefits from having better maps, better a window to see things, and better labels and terms to enable us to interact more effectively?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned throughout my career is that human beings tend to perform better when we have those kinds of things to help us: roadmaps, models, windows, whatever it happens to be. The thing about the PESO model is, when we first launched it, it was so basic and so tactical. But one of the things I found is that when I threw it up on a screen in front of a group of CEOs, they all went, like it had never occurred to them that we do all this other stuff, that we don't just do media relations, we do all of this other stuff. And we have for years. They weren't able to make that connection. So I think any sort of model or window or roadmap or path or whatever it happens to be that helps not just the industry, but the people that we're serving as well understand what it is that we do, the better off we'll be.
And then on that step 5 is the idea, developing from an idea from Professor Jim McNamara in Australia of a distrust spectrum. So at one hand, you've got people who are disengaged, untrusting, and people are over-trusting, which can lead to both not just being naive, but is also the platform for prejudice, bias, and dogma, that you only believe in a very narrow, specific view. And in the middle is this stuff that enables society to function, that we coexist, cooperate, collaborate, and what we've labeled purposeful trust. And we're saying this is precious, because without it as a society, we cannot function, and enables social cohesion. And that perhaps in communications practice, or comms practice, whatever we want to call it, we not only need to both earn confidence, but also invest in social cohesion at the same time. And there's a label here, possible regenerative comms, that seeks both earn confidence and replenish and enhance purposeful trust and the wider social fabric together. Just any thoughts on these ideas?
I'm writing myself a note. Yes, and I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning, which, you know, we talked about how so much has changed in the last 3 years, and it's so important now for organizations to be talking about purpose and values, when before everybody was told not to communicate those things, because the idea being that if you communicated your values and your purpose as an organization, you would lose customers. And you never wanted to make anybody mad. You wanted to serve everybody. And I think today we're in a world where that has changed, and we do need to stand up for our values and for our purpose. And that's what customers are searching for, right? They're looking for organizations that where their values and mission are aligned, just as individuals and as organizations. And so when you think about how regenerative comms is going to earn that confidence that we talked about before, while replenishing and enhancing trust, those are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about as an industry, because that's what's going to change the way that the entire world operates, the way that that our society operates, and the way that we do business.
And then lastly, at the end of our sort of 5 steps to the window, to sort of enable us to step outside, you know, explaining how we do what we do using any of the existing labels of such as advertising, communications, journalism, marketing, PR, and so on. Enables us to sort of see a bigger picture. And it's not to say to do away with those terms, but what ways can they be grown, enhanced, or replaced with better ideas? So after doing the 5 steps, do you feel more confident now about addressing this question? What does better look like for us all?
Yeah, I mean, I've written down quite a few things. I love the idea of creating confidence to be purposeful. One of the things that you said in the very beginning that I think is really important not to gloss over, which is there's all this research on behavioral science and neuroscience and psychology and how that affects the way that we work and the way that we live and the way that we make decisions. And I think it's a lot to ask a communicator to have an MBA because they need to understand data and show results, and be behavior scientists and understand how data works together in the work that we do, and understand how the brain works in making decisions, and be psychologists. But I feel like that's where we're heading, is to have an understanding of that. And you know, one of the things that I've been reading a lot about that you mentioned early on as well is, I can't remember the name of the book, but one of Adam Grant's books talks about how to unlearn the things that you do so that you can create more purpose. And so I think that there's a pretty big opportunity here for us to change the conversation for sure.
So in terms of a lot of things the Dublin conversations should be doing different, you mentioned about raining on parades earlier and so on. What sort of things should we be doing different if we want to be successful in, you know, creating a conversation that provides an option, not necessarily the answer, but an option to stimulate, you know, growing a collective wisdom? Is there anything we should be doing different?
I don't necessarily think different, but you had that, I think it was step 2, where you had the framework of what it takes, and it's like in top of mind, and those things, you know, now it's your job to do those things so that everybody in the industry globally understands what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and any action steps you can suggest to achieve that?
Yes, lots of thought leadership, lots of content marketing, lots of social media.
Yeah.
These conversations, having influencers help you, all that stuff.
Magnificent. Well, thank you very much for. I'll switch to stop the recording now. And thank you so much for our fascinating conversation there.